So, life is completely unfair. Too much of the human experience can be chalked up to just luck. It doesn't matter how strong, fast, or smart you are. Sometimes you can do everything right, but the gods of RNG may just decide you don't deserve to have joy that day. Maybe we try to fight the RNG, minimize its power, position ourselves into situations where we don't have to put things up to chance. Anyway, definitely not related, Mud and Blood 2. I have no direct memory of how I first came into contact with this game. I just remember playing this on Congregate. I think the best 10-year-old me got was like wave 90 or so. Failing just before reaching wave 100 is definitely an event that would cause a child to rage quit this game. Now that I'm older with a grasp of tactics that's beyond just big tank strong, I've realized that wave 100 is fairly mid. The first time you make it to the 100th wave, it's a big milestone. The 10th time you do, it's like, alright, this run is officially a B-. The main goal of the game is to survive as long as you can. There are ribbons which are basically achievements, but I'll talk about them later. You must defend the line. If 10 Germans get past the bottom of your screen, you lose. If your squad is wiped out, you lose. There is some jank on whether unmanned vehicles count as alive. You don't have that much control on the field. You dictate how your squad moves, but they attack on their own. They also stop their movements by themselves if they feel like shooting, or when they're being shot at. The concentrate fire order can make your troops focus on the target, but that has a lengthy cooldown, and sometimes your units can just ignore it. Not like maliciously, it honestly feels more like they just didn't hear the command. I don't think that's intentional on the game's part, but that's likely more accurate. I do think, however, that only having half control of your units was a deliberate choice that makes it feel more like you're a field commander. This is only something you get frustrated by when you first play Mud and Blood. It's really quite easy to deal with and get used to, even if it can still mess you up occasionally. This point bank in the bottom right corner is your main resource. Everything you want to bring in will cost points. You get 2 points per wave for the first 5 waves, and then 1 point per wave for the rest of the game. Unless it's a blitz wave, in that case you get 5 points. 5 points is not nearly enough to survive any of the blitz waves. Blitz waves are the thing designed to make sure that no game is endless. They become much more common the longer the game goes. There are many types of them. Some are stronger than others. If you encounter a sniper blitz wave and you don't have your own snipers or a method of carpet bombing, your best option is to just go lie down. The Germans also scale hard. Early on, basically nothing can hit your guys, but past wave 100, even the weakest German recruits now have aimbots. They can be scaled back with a certain supply crate, which are periodically dropped on the field. The detailed orders crate makes it so that the Germans will act like the wave counter is 10 waves lower. Crates also have other benefits. They can give you 1 to 3 points, a random soldier, increased vehicle health, increased morale, and increased rifle skills, but like half of the time they have nothing. Your flesh soldiers have 3 main stats: rifle skill, EXP, and morale. Skill affects how accurate a soldier is, EXP affects how often a soldier will fire their gun, and morale affects how long a soldier stays pinned and what level of enemy fire will pin a soldier in the first place. EXP is mainly increased by killing enemies. There are some secondary sources. Crates give some to the unit that collects the crate, and moving forward on the map gives everyone 1 EXP and gives you 1 tactic point. Every 10 EXP, a soldier will gain a rank up. Skill and morale are increased by a random amount. EXP itself caps at 100, unlike the other two which don't have caps. Of course, gun skill is important, you want to hit your targets, but this stat is the hardest to increase. Besides ranking up and getting lucky on crates, it's pretty static. Morale is the most liquid. It fluctuates the most and would seem unimportant to a new player. I don't care how fast you fire, if you aren't shooting at all, none of that matters. If the morale is low, it takes less aggro for a soldier to get pinned, and they will stay pinned for longer. Morale is also the only stat that can be lowered. Losing high-ranked troops or having someone explode next to their buddies can dampen the mood a bit. If morale reaches 0, the soldier deserts, unless there's someone like a Spec Ops or Sarge. Thankfully, it's also the easiest stat to increase. The command order that increases morale scales off of the field officer's XP. At 100 and beyond, the soldier will become basically unpinnable and never stop firing. 100 morale also makes them near immune to morale drops. Vehicles are a completely different beast from flesh units. They don't have a morale stat, so they can't be pinned and will never retreat. In exchange for this, they usually start with a much lower skill level and it's harder to heal them. There's also a thing they can do where they can kind of game the XP system. Gunner of truck dies. Replacement gets on gun. Rank and XP are reset, but any gained rifle skill is kept. In this case, they're kind of slow firing, but they can become an insanely strong unit. The loss of an insanely strong unit that took the entire game to build up usually marks the end of most runs, which brings me to some old sentiments. Back in the day, this game had a small reputation of being rather unfair. This came about for multiple reasons. The base stats of our soldiers are semi-randomized. Snipers will always have high skill, but that doesn't stop them or any other unit from low rolling. Again, you only half control the soldiers on the field, and sometimes they can seem really dumb or just unresponsive. Blitz waves are designed to be more than you can handle. Getting unlucky means the run ends 30 waves earlier than it should have, but these are just some minor add-ons to the main reason for this game's reputation. When you lose a run, it's either very sudden and you aren't expecting it, or everything has been shitty since the beginning and the loss felt drawn out. It can take a while for the soldiers to set up a good defense, gaining experience across the board and building up the structures and skills to hold the line. Then, all of a sudden, a stray just kills the veteran guy holding the squad together, and the situation is hopeless. Even if you have a ton of points saved up, new soldiers are coming in on wave 110 completely inexperienced with a fraction of the skill and morale. Losing is either this or you never get set up in the first place. This game doesn't really have a win condition, you just survive as long as you can. This kind of gameplay is not rare, like at all, but back in the day, this might have been the first experience people played that doesn't have an ending. You can only delay losing for as long as you can, which is a pretty bad way to think about it, but for some people back then, it might have been the only way to think about it. Also, from what I can remember, a lot of new players just did not know about Mud and Blood's soft cap. You can have 6 units on the field, but once soldier number 7 is visible, the Germans will be sending all the artillery and planes in your general direction, making it way harder to set up a good defense. Bombs don't get sent to you if you keep your squad at 6 or below. This illustrates another reason for the reputation. The game doesn't really teach you much. It just throws you into the pool and watches you flap your arms. Maybe it will occasionally shout a hint at you. Things were figured out by trial and error or word of mouth. Don't get me wrong, this game can be completely bullshit at times. You can get unlucky and crash out extremely early. But at this point, I feel like most of us can deal with that now. It is actually quite fun once you get into it. Units themselves are of course the bread and butter of any squad, and the other tabs are reliant on them as a baseline. Command orders are always useful and give you ever so slightly more control over your units. There's a command order which tells a unit to retreat back across the line. It has a 25% chance of refunding the soldier. Do not expect to hit the 25%. Buildings are the hidden secret to surviving many waves. They all require an engineer, but making it beyond wave 100 usually needs heavy usage of buildings. All of them have their niches, but I recommend getting trenches, bunkers, and pillboxes fast. Once you have your defenses set up and some expendable points, make a giant minefield for an extra layer of protection. Equipment is my least used tab, but it seems to be fine. None are bad, but few of them are super important. That being said, there are gaps in my knowledge. I did not know that scouts just loved grenades. They're basically demo men. If you give them grenades of any kind, they endlessly spam them. If people didn't tell me this, I would have just kept thinking that they were mid. The Air Command tab is the most niche of the bunch, requires an officer and signaler for most of them. Having bombers and artillery on standby gives you a feeling of strength, but it's expensive to set up and maintain. Air support is never the main character, it's often just emergency anti-armor. Two things are needed to get good runs: a thing that can deal with armored enemies and a guy that can deal with mass infantry. Your troops that can handle armored units will often have trouble with the faster moving packs of infantry, and the guy that can deal with the pack of Germans will often have trouble with the one big German. The early waves consist of fending off weak groups in preparation for the hellfire that's going to come. You can take your pick from a variety of anti-infantry setup, but there is one that is most definitely better than the rest and basically meta. A gunner in a bunker and trench. The bunker gives high protection from explosives. In exchange, almost all troops inside fire slower. The gunner is an exception to that downside. He shoots faster inside of a bunker. This increased speed makes him unmatched. Once the gunner starts ramping up in skill, enemy infantry arrive on the field dead men walking. The bunker also provides so much protection. It's not immune from explosions, and like everything else, you can get unlucky with it. But the bunker often provides enough time for whatever anti-armor weapons you have to take out the thing chucking explosives at you. Honestly, compared to the other anti-infantry options, offense-wise, the gunner in a box is roughly as strong as the others. It's just that the bunker provides so much natural defensiveness that the gunner just lives longer and fights longer than all of the other options. In terms of the anti-armor arsenal, there are ones I like better than others, but there's no clear best among them. However, there is a clear worst option. AT cannons are just way too fragile and miss so often. All of the others are roughly the same, although I personally like the land mattress and minefields the best. A good defense is a combination of anti-infantry, anti-armor, alongside the various support units like officers, engineers, and medics, all of which have to be balanced under the soft unit cap of 6. Please note, plans are rarely going to go perfectly. Expect some parts to fall off the car and hope whatever dropped was not too important. Again, sometimes the game can just decide that humanity does not deserve mercy and you in particular deserve nothing. When that happens, it's best to just take a break and come back later. If you want generic advice to get higher waves, use buildings. The engineer is a support unit with decent offense that gives you access to buildings. He's the best unit in the game because he gives you access to buildings. If nothing else, please use trenches. They are the most important thing in this game. However, I think an equally important piece of advice is to just have fun with it sometimes. After playing a bit too much gunner bunker, occasionally I just want to play something silly. Do a pyro run, set up a bazooka squad, send in the French. Of course, to quickly set up some of the silly squads, you need to use close protection. Oh right, I still need to talk about the modes. You gain XP from runs and unlock more deployment options as you get promoted. Regular deployment has the 4 standard soldiers. Hasty defense requires captain and has 4 random soldiers. And I swear, the RNG is rigged towards Frenchies. Close protection requires major, and you start with no soldiers but 12 points already in the bank. This is the most common mode people play on as it's the easiest one to form a strategy with. Special Operations requires Lieutenant Colonel, and you start with 4 Spec Ops and a point bank at -10. If you like Spec Ops a lot, this is the mode for you. Proper planning requires Colonel and carries over the unused points from your previous run. I mean, you can technically start with like 20 plus points in the bank, but you kind of have to sacrifice your last game. Last Stand requires a general level rank and gives you a crap ton of points at the start, but you don't gain any points per wave, and wave 1 will spawn enemies like it's wave 100. Finally, the Air Trooper Challenge. You get 1 attempt for every promotion. You start with 4 paratroopers and you can't summon any other units during this run. Some specific options are made just for this challenge. The goal here is to make it to wave 100 and it is hard. Completing the challenge gives you the Airborne badge, which makes it so every time you call in paratroopers you get 6 instead of just 4. This brings me to the ribbons. These are your main form of progression. Your rank will get you new modes. These medals will make you stronger. They vary quite heavily. Some are given just playing the game. Like, deploy 100 soldiers total and now every soldier you request has a 1% chance to be free. Play 100 games of Mud and Blood and now you start every run with 1 point in the bank. 500 games of Mud and Blood and now you start every run with 2 more points in the bank. The Bronze, Silver, and Gold Star ribbons are given for surviving to wave 50, 100, and 150 respectively. They all give a slight chance to start a game with an additional soldier, and they stack with each other. The Combat Ribbon and Medal of Honor are issued when 100 and 200 enemies have been killed in one mission, and each give a stacking 3% bonus to your unit's skill levels. They're easy to get, but it's like a +2 to rifle skill on average. These seem like rather minor buffs to your squad, and most ribbons are like this. There are some medals that are easy to get and give game-changing effects. Promote 5 field units to lieutenant and get a free officer at the start of every run, a unit you were likely going to get anyway. You're granted a logistic ribbon after 50 crate collections, which accelerates the dropping of crates from then on. Not always good, but does change some things. If by run 50 less than 1,000 men were deployed, the cooldown of concentrate fire is reduced by 30 seconds, giving you far more control. The maneuver ribbon is the easiest one to get. Survive 5 minutes with your initial squad, get a medal. Anytime you do this again, get a point. There are some medals that are connected to a specific niche unit. Burn 50 Germans, get a 1% chance to start with a pyromaniac. Issue 100 airstrikes. Further airstrikes now have a 1% chance to be free. Have 100 kills in melee combat. Your troops now deal 10% more melee damage. Get a French guy to lieutenant rank. Everyone in France is now 33% stronger. Make 50 buildings and further structures now have a 1% chance to be free. Blow up 100 Germans. Your troops now have a 10% chance to deploy with grenades. There's also some silly ones. This one tells you to go to McDonald's. You get the Kyoto ribbon by destroying 50 trees and it gives you nothing. Here's a slight hot take. Most people can't just play video games for high scores. There has to be at least a little bit of a sense of progression. These ribbons are a good way to do progression, especially the challenge medals. Reach wave 100 on D-Day, Remembrance Day, or the Mud and Blood anniversary, and you get to start runs with an extra point in the bank. Survive to wave 100 without losing a soldier and you increase your point maximum by 1. Survive to wave 100 without buildings or vehicles and increase your point cap by 3. There's 3 challenge medals issued if you survive a certain amount of waves within a certain amount of runs, and they give some of the strongest buffs. If by run 25 you have survived 1000 total waves, every basic soldier starts the game with a better rifle. The run counter isn't inclusive, so wave 1000 must be completed in run 24, which means you need to average about 41 waves per run. I did not know this ribbon existed until it was too late. I goofed around too much in the beginning. If I knew about this, I would have gotten it first before going full French. If by run 50 you survive 5,000 total waves, every single soldier now starts with 9 EXP, making them scale way faster. This is easily the strongest buff out of any of the ribbons. It's also very hard to get as it requires an average of roughly 102 waves per run. I'm nowhere near that. This one is for the people that are actually skilled at this game. As with the last challenge ribbon, the Victorian Cross, 10,000 waves survived and less than 2,500 troops deployed before game 100. Gives you 1 free paratrooper airdrop per run. Honestly, kind of mid. It's slightly easier than the previous medal, as you only need to average 101 waves per game. You can just ignore the soldier limitation. You're not going to get anywhere near it. These ribbons are a pretty neat system. It's just that the game doesn't tell you much about them. Like, unless you look it up, you're likely never going to know about the challenge ribbons, as goofing off is a natural human instinct. Looking at the game as a whole, it's kind of slapdash together. I do like the aesthetics and graphics. There is a charm to its roughness, but it is quite rough. There's no music, and almost every sound effect and voice line is taken from somewhere else. Of course, it's intentionally designed to be unfair at times, and luck is preferred. I think most of the options you're given have a chance to be viable. They all have their niches, but some options are very much better than others. Looking at this game, it's a bit of a mixed bag, but something about it allows me to ignore its flaws. The combination of so many different types of enemies trying to pierce the defensive line you spent so long setting up, the non-zero chance of complete and sudden destruction just being dropped on you, and the backup plans you have to make to counter that. The small but consistent sense of glee as one of your soldiers slowly grow into becoming your squad's ace, the absolute devastation and rage you feel when that ace's innards fly everywhere, and the immediate need to move on, or else you'll be overwhelmed even faster. Anyway, that's the game. I was going to cover the various Mud and Blood spin-offs and Mud and Blood's theme. Those games deserve more than just 4 combined minutes, so they'll be their own videos. After a little while, that is. I am feeling a bit burnt out of Mud and Blood. Okay, next will be me driving through New York traffic.